Looking back on the week that was and forward to the week ahead. It's the Fantasy Football Hustle. Here are your hosts, Brian Drake and Dwayne McFarland.
Hey, what's going on across fantasy land? It is Brian Drake from FightingChanceFantasy.com. Joined as always by my main man, the analytical assassin, Dwayne McFarland of Pro Football Focus and Establish the Run. Dwayne, we got a big one tonight, my friend. This is a guy I put on the Mount Rushmore of fantasy, without question. Someone who, as everybody knows, who listened to this show for the past now 3 years, I got my start in radio. I was a writer. I did play-by-play. I was a DJ, doing all that stuff. And about, 20 years ago when I started playing fantasy football, the first site I ever signed up for was Mr. John Hansen's old site. And I've been a subscriber to wherever he goes ever since. And now he lands at his new venture, fantasypoints.com. And I'm happy to say that I signed up and I'm a subscriber over there, supporting good friends of the show, Joe Dolan, Graham Barfield. So Dwayne, we welcome in the guru, John Hansen.
Yeah.
What's up, Dwayne and Brian? Thank you for your support over the years. You've been one of our most adamant supporters over the last, like you said, 20 years. So thank you.
Yeah, you do belong on that, on the Rushmore, because John, you're the only fantasy analyst that my wife actually knows who you are.
Wow. Now that's all right.
You're the only one. She doesn't know who anybody else is. I'll tell her who we're having on the show. And I love Evan. We can have Evan Silva on. It doesn't matter. She's like, who? But she knows you because on the road trips to Florida in the summer, I would always have it on, and there's Guru in the morning on SiriusXM. And so she's like, oh yeah, the guy from, the guy that does all the voices and the noises. And I'm like, yeah, that guy.
The guy who's teetering right on the brink of annoying me, but he's not. So yeah, we dig that guy. Yeah, that's great. That's awesome.
So of course you hear John every morning, Monday through Friday. Now, 52 weeks a year on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. You also see him the past few years on DirecTV's the Fantasy Zone, which has just been unbelievable. John, when do you sleep, by the way? Well, your wife has to just not see you for 6 months a year.
It's not good this time of the year. Like I'm here down the shore, and first of all, it's so damn humid you can't even go outside. That is one. But I would say today we're taping this at 9:08 Eastern. I've literally today alone spent literally like 9 minutes with my family, but I try and make up for it, off season type, January, February, all that crap. So they're used to it now. Nobody in my family follows the NFL. They don't care. They can name like 4 players, maybe as a group, like 4 children and my wife, 5 total. They could probably name 4 players total. That's how little they care. So they try, and it's so all-encompassing. My wife always said that if she really got into it, then our entire lives would be controlled by the NFL and fantasy football. So, they make a conscious effort to not give a rat's ass, basically.
Let me ask you, before we get into all the draft plan stuff and everything. So as everybody knows, you didn't put out any content last year. How difficult was that for you as someone who for the prior, 23 years or so was writing an article, writing all this stuff, weekly, and your rankings you're putting out, and, that's your livelihood. And a year ago, for various business reasons, you couldn't do that until Fantasy Points launched this year. Was it really difficult for you? Were you chomping at the bit? Did it reignite a hunger inside you?
Yeah, well, I think it was most difficult because I had motivational issues because like I'm doing last year projections in the preseason. I'm updating them like I normally always did. And I did weekly projections all year for like 42 people, basically. I gave friends and I gave basically friends a link to a Google Doc essentially that was tied to it. So they were like, "Oh, I need your stuff," and I'm like, "Well, I'm still doing it." But again, there was no pressure and no real motivation. But what I learned, I always knew this, is that I'm able to do the radio and I'm able to do the TV because I don't prepare for it because I'm always doing this. So one of the reasons I went back into the website business is, I'm not ready to retire. My plan was to do the media and things like that. But again, I actually have to work and prepare, which I'm like, whoa, I'm not used to that. Like if I'm going to work and prepare, I might as well, my wife calls me all or nothing boy. I might as well be all in or else I'm out, So it was a little difficult. It was a little weird. But this year we're back and I haven't really missed a beat. I was just thinking today, like, well, this is a pretty normal August 13th or 14th for me because, I've been running around, like a chicken without my head for about 18 hours here. And, we're back and we're feeling pretty good about it. But last year was pretty damn weird.
If you go over to fantasypoints.com, you're going to find some insane content. We've had on the show Graham Barfield a couple of weeks ago. We've had Joe Dolan on the show recently. They're all part of the site. I want to hear about how you pulled this team together. You got Scott Barrett. I believe he was over at PFF where Dwayne now works. You've got Greg Cosell producing content, which I never thought I would see. I love the Friday spots with him on Sirius. Yeah. And now you can go read his game notes. I was just reading him breaking down Carson Wentz from games last year. And you have a new special thing over at Fantasy Points, the Fantasy Points Generator, which I know you're very proud of. And guys can do mock drafts and it's going to help you pick your team. So just tell us a little bit about how you brought the team together and when someone goes and subscribes this year, like what they can find at fantasypoints.com.
Well, I think they find a pretty diverse group of contributors that we all have our own strengths and put together. It is something that can probably appease almost any fantasy related taste. But as you know, Brian, like basically everyone but Scott has worked for me in the past. And that includes Adam Kaplan, Greg Cosell. I kind of dragged into the fantasy industry 15 years ago. And I'm pretty proud of that because Greg for a long time was just kind of this genius that no one really knew about. And me and Adam Kaplan, brought him into the forefront starting on NFL radio 17 years ago. And our relationship has grown from there. And, Joe Dolan, I hired out of college in 2009. He was 22 years old. Played fantasy, but that was about it. But, he's a very smart guy and all that. Tom Brawley was hired by me in 2018. He's friends with Joe. They both went to Penn State. They were both editors of the Daily Collegian, the paper. They're sports editors of their paper. Good dude, all that. So he worked for me at the previous website. Again, Adam and Greg. And then Graham, I hired. He was a part-time guy, and I was, I guess, the first one. I definitely recognize that talent quickly. And, he's like an old soul. So, talking with him when he was like 22 years old, it's like talking to a 35-year-old dude. I'm like, yeah, I like this guy. Then, so like I said, the only new one was Scott, who actually, it was honestly, I almost hired Scott when I hired Graham. It was basically between those two. It was like a coin flip type of thing. Oh, wow. And since he's really tight with before he was even hired at Pro Football Focus, he's really tight with Graham, and I like what Scott does. We do have some similarities, him and I, in some ways, but yeah, it's just really the old crew. And one of the other reasons was like Joe and Tom, they called me up, I guess January 2019. They're like, man, we need you, basically. I must be a good boss, I guess, because they're like, yeah, can we do it again? I'm like, all right, screw it, let's do it all over again, baby. Yeah, let's get the band back together. And a lot of people don't know that, by the way. I mean, there are a lot of people obviously who do and are really happy about it, and we feel very flattered by that. But we just did a Google Trend search today, and I'm sure you guys have seen something similar, but this time last year, in terms of Google and interest on the interwebs in fantasy football, this exact day, fantasy football was peaking. It was at 37% peak popularity. This time right now, it's at 7%.
Yeah. We mentioned that to Evan Silva. We had him on earlier in the week, and I said that to him. I go, as someone who runs a site, have you seen a noticeable lag in clicks, basically? Because I went golfing with some guys from my home league over the weekend. I'm like, hey, you guys, you ready for the league? And we got the draft coming up. Every single guy said, there's not going to be a season. I haven't done any research at all.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, like I'm either going to win this league or look like the biggest fool of all time when I come in last place.
Yep, no doubt about it.
And you guys are seeing that too. Like, do you just think all of a sudden a light switch is going to go off 2 weeks from now?
Yes, I do. It is going to be a mad dash and a mad rush the final 15 days of the preseason, 100%. Now, it's a little weird for us because we're a startup. So we're also starting up during a pandemic. Let's not forget that.
It's crazy.
And people, their economy and their economical situation is a little shaky here. But, I feel like we're very affordably priced compared to our top competitors, many of which you need to take out a home equity loan to subscribe. So I don't think that's the case for us. And we also give out discounts and the like. But I do believe that, Brian, that everyone's just kind of hanging in there right now. They don't want to commit. They're skeptical. They want to get their hopes up, or maybe they are skeptical, and they don't feel like there's going to be a season. But right now, there's going to be a season. The NFL is not going to be denied. I am lined up for DirecTV. That is obviously a tight relationship with the NFL. And as it stands right now, in 4 weeks, I will be flying to Los Angeles to do television for DirecTV and the Sunday Ticket and all that crap.
It's amazing. And you were a magazine guy years ago.
Yeah, we had a magazine 7 years. Yeah. It served its purpose. I always said at the time, I was saying like, there are magazines out there that have websites. We're a website that has a magazine. It was like one big ad. Did that for 7 years, and it was good, but it became a little bit of a pain in the rear and much less profitable. You have to bear with me. I've been up for about 15 hours and my brain is just not firing straightly here. But I think what really hurt it was all the offshore stuff. The offshore gambling ads and stuff were really carrying fantasy mags. A lot of the early 2000s and the mid 2000s, that all kind of dried up. But that was a successful run. I always took a lot of great pride in the cover. Like that was my thing. Like if I put you on the cover, like that is an endorsement. And I always tried to pick a guy that surprised people a little bit. Never the obvious guy. I think my most proudest moment there was in 2008. I put a guy on the cover and people were like, really? This guy on the cover? Marshawn Lynch. And I was like, well, we told you in 2008 that Marshawn Lynch was a beast. I mean, we all knew he was beast mode and all that, but that was a phase. I feel bad for the people who are like all in on magazines now. Cause man, do you guys buy mags?
Nope.
I always buy one from Bob Harris because I go see him at the Kings Classic and he's a great dude. And so I always like to, support Bob and those guys. So 2 questions. One, because I did a Twitter poll and I said, where do you get your fantasy draft info? And I had put a couple of options. It was like podcasts, YouTube, websites, and magazines. Magazines got 4%.
Wow.
They were the lowest result. I couldn't believe it. Whereas podcasts was number 1 and websites was number 2. But with that, who would you put on the 2020 cover?
That's what I was going to ask.
That's a great question.
Who would be the cover?
By the way, I feel like I was ahead of the curve in that a little bit because in 2009, I was like, you know what? We're done. And I wrote in the editor's letter in 2009 that I wrote May of 2009. I said, if you're not on Twitter, I said, Twitter's the future. If you're not on Twitter, you're going to get your ass kicked in fantasy football. So that's, 11 years ago. I think that was pretty prophetic, but that's a great question. I think I'd go Barkley. I think I'd go Saquon because he's not the obvious number 1 choice, though I think he'll be what Christian McCaffrey was last year, a 23-year-old stud who's durable and versatile and has 2 years in the league, yet he's still freaking 23 years old. So therefore, most likely he's going to have the best season of his career in 2020. That's what I said about McCaffrey last year. It's what I'm going to say this year about Saquon.
We love talking about young ascending talent on this show, and that's kind of what you built your whole career on. Dwayne just did an article over at PFF on A.J. Brown. So I'd love to hit some stuff on, with you, as you and Kaplan might say, hit on some guys.
Yeah.
Let's hear some young ascending talent that you're targeting here in 2020.
Right. First of all, I was wrong on A.J. Brown last year, so I'll throw that one out there. I thought he was slow, which he is, but it doesn't matter. So that's number one. So at quarterback, I think in terms of young ascending talents who haven't really proven themselves, I am very much in on Josh Allen for fantasy this year. I'm not sure he totally fits the profile, but I think we default simply to Daniel Jones right there. I guess he has some skeptics, but I am absolutely a believer in Daniel Jones, and certainly you love the supporting cast, everything that they've done. Ball security is an issue. He needs to clean up on that. But I really loved his willingness to, make, throws into tight windows and not afraid. Very old school guy. And as I say a lot on the radio when I kind of talk about him, his ascension feels old school to me. I know he's got the relationship with the Mannings, but it kind of reminds me of Peyton Manning in 1998. And I was in this business back then doing this. And it was, you got to take the good with the bad, but you could see that there was something there. So I think that's very similar this year with Daniel Jones. Baker Mayfield, I'm still in. I'm still a believer in him. I think he'll do very well this year. And I think last year you burned the tape. It was just a cluster F from the beginning with their O-line, the protection issues, a schism within the coaching staff, OBJ blowing off, voluntary workouts because he's got a prior commitment. Like, really, dude? It's freaking May. But this year things have changed with their O-line corrections at the tackle spot. New system, of course. Baker is perfect for that. So I like Joe Burrow as well. Obviously, we saw, Kyler Murray get it done last year. I think Burrow is actually very comparable to a Daniel Jones. I'm really in on the running back. So I guess that's not an ascending talent. You have to play 1 year, right, to be an ascending talent. Is that correct?
If you're young, it doesn't matter. If you're a rookie, it's cool. Right.
I don't see, Miles Sanders, I think, is still kind of ascending. I think his best football is still in front of him. That's been my mantra this year. When I take a running back in the first, second, or maybe even the third round, with maybe a couple exceptions, I want to make sure I'm taking a player most likely whose best football is still in front of him or is still right here in the here and now. So I think Miles Sanders fits that to a T. Josh Jacobs, we're a little worried about the injuries in the shoulder, but I think he's looking really, really good. And
what are your thoughts on Kenyon Drake?
Love the Drake. Sometimes I hate the Drake. We know how it is. Obviously, he is in the perfect spot for his skill set. There's absolutely something going on there. I never really got to the bottom of what. I don't think he's a bad guy, but there's something there above and beyond Adam Gase. But obviously, you'd be hard pressed to find, a dream scenario for him. And their whole line is actually not that bad. So yeah, I'm fine with the Drake. Maybe my expectations are tempered just a little bit. I've got him at RB12. We do on the website here. Love the two rookies, Jonathan Taylor and Cam Akers. I still need to think about David Montgomery, but I think I'm probably out on David Montgomery and DeAndre Swift as well. So, not a ton of.
What's got you out on? Sorry, I have to jump in because I love talking about this stuff. So, what has you out on Swift? Because for me, when I look at Jonathan Taylor, I obviously love the talent. But if you look at running backs drafted in the second round, there's 28 of them in the last, since 2007. Only one time when you had a guy land behind at least a decent starter or even an aging vet were they able to jump into the top 36, for fantasy performers. And there's really good guys on that list. There's Derrick Henry. There's 4 or 5 guys that were like, wow, those guys were really studs. They landed behind guys that were like, I don't know. Does DeMarco Murray have anything left? So I do worry a little bit about Marlon Mack. I love the offensive line. I love the talent, but I just worry, are they just going to have to split it too much? Whereas Akers or Swift, I don't like their situation as much, but I see a better chance of they could just take the backfield over.
Yeah, that's obviously perfectly fair. And I do think Swift is a good player. I don't watch a ton of college football, but I did watch a good amount of Georgia games. Obviously, they were in a lot of big games. So I absolutely know all about DeAndre Swift. I know Darrell Bevel, the offensive coordinator, did a really good job overall last year. I still don't trust him. I don't trust their handling of running backs. And I think most importantly, they're not going to bail totally on Kerryon Johnson. I've been told that they're going to use Kerryon in the passing game, which I think does make some sense. You're not going to put DeAndre Swift out there real early and worry about his pass pro and things like that. So I think that could cap the upside. And I'm not yet convinced that they're not going to try to give Bo Scarborough some carries, believe it or not, because he actually did a pretty good job in early downs. But more often than not, more than anything, I think I'm just skeptical of the Lions in general. I have been doing this for a long, long time. When Barry Sanders retired, Barry Sanders and I are the exact same age, by the way. He's a 2 weeks older than me. So when he retired at 30, I was at 30 writing about fantasy football. And
but has he ever blown out a hamstring, John, racing someone on Halloween?
Probably not. But how many? I mean, I know it's lazy analysis, but I mean, how many great running backs have the Lions had? I mean, they just ruin people. So I'm skeptical on Swift, mainly because of Kerryon, though. And again, a little bit of Bo Scarborough. I know their line is probably a little above average. I love Frank the Tank and all that, but Matt Patricia, I don't like the coaching staff all that much.
You don't like the pencil?
I hate the pencil.
You're with most of our subscribers. They hate the pencil.
I mean, the dude's walking around at the combine in February with a pencil. Okay, that's a bit much.
Don't all these Patriot assistants that go off somewhere else, like they all have this kind of like, I don't know, like Belichick daddy issue where they have to try 100%. To be Belichick and they bring it to a new team, and all these guys just kind of look at him like, get out of here. Like, who's this guy? Like, you can't bring 100%. That here. You have to earn the respect. You're not Belichick with all those rings.
And if we're doing predictive analytics here, I mean, the last guy to wear a pencil behind and John, you may have another one, but I think it's Mike Tice. Like, how'd that work out?
Not well. I mean,
I think we've got it. This is a direct correlation here. Pencil behind the ear, you suck.
Yeah, pencil ears. We're down on pencil ears. Okay, so avoid.
John, you've been a guy you've always talked about. You're not a super analytics guy, but you do great projections. You're always somebody who has, you and Joe Dolan, the rankings on Fantasy Pros are always, top 5, and you guys touted on the website, and it's fantastic. So you've always talked though about how you use your eyes and ears and your gut, and that's kind of how you build projections. Dwayne over here works at PFF, and he uses tons of great data for his projections. So I'd love to hear your guys kind of like the yin and the yang of making really good predictions for fantasy football and how it all comes together.
Well, for me, it's not just gut. I think it's a function of having a very extensive knowledge base with decades of experience, and it's just crammed into that brain and that knowledge base. So when I go and I manually do my projections. I don't automate it in any way, shape, or form. So, I mean, I obviously know the interesting and revealing stats that are, that we start with, yard per carry, all that stuff and all that. But I guess I just feel like I have a good ability to bring in myriad data points and myriad angles and kind of massage the numbers to reflect a wide variety of elements. So, if I'm doing DeAndre Swift's projection, I know he's got plenty of juice. I know he's a good receiver out of the backfield. He's also a rookie in a lost off season. Like I said a moment ago, I feel like they do want to use Kerryon in the passing game. I mean, they're not just bench Kerryon. They're going to utilize him in some way, shape, or form. He was terrible running the football last year, so I think they're looking to get whatever they can out of him. So knowing that, I pull back a little bit from the number of targets and things like that. So I just have a pretty good gut feel too. But I had the gut feel, but the gut feel is not just random. It comes from doing the homework. And I'm not a big data or stat guy, but I know what the data says and things like that. I'm a little bit more of a qualitative guy, but I'm able to put it all together and come out with a number that's got like the human element like really baked into it. What's really interesting about it is if you listen to the radio show, I do shows with Mike Clay all the time, and he's the opposite of me, really. And guess what? our numbers are almost exactly the same all the time.
Isn't that
Friend of the show, Mike Clay, we've had him on.
Yeah.
Good dude.
But I love that. I mean, I still do mine manually as well. Obviously, I'm bringing in a ton of data. I don't automate. I don't like that.
Yeah.
I'm very much with John. I mean, I've been doing it for 20 years, and so it's a process that you do learn. It's like a lot of people read Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about this all the time. He says to be an expert in something, 10,000 hours. And so because you do reach this point to where there's stuff that just comes to you and you didn't even research it, but then you verify it, you trust but verify still, and you're like, no, that is right. And I agree. I think what's probably helped me the most, obviously I try to tweak how I do it every year and make it better and better. We're going to have Josh Hermsmeyer on the show at some point. He's got some ideas that I've seen him talk about on Twitter I may bring into my model, but at the end of the day, it's what John said. You're looking at the roster, you're looking at the depth chart, you're thinking, is this going to be a good team? Is it going to be a bad team? But all these things are coming together, and it's like, because I'm with you, like I'm not nuts on DeAndre Swift. I got him at 180 something points, something like that, in full point PPR, but I don't have him at 70% of the carries. I have him at half of them and 10%.
By the way, I've got him with 177.
There we go. So we're close. Yeah. How many carries you got, John?
My number is 185.
I got him right at 205. See, we're right there.
Pretty close. Yep. Pretty close.
Only 5 rushing touchdowns, though, is all I'm giving him.
See, and you know what the difference is? You're not thinking of Bo Scarborough, which may be right, but I mean that guy he actually gave them like a base running game last year.
Well, he's part of why I only gave Swift 5.
Okay.
Because I feel like he's going to have to break some of them longer to get them. And Scarborough could turn into a vulture. I don't think it's going to happen, but I am with you. I've got Scarborough, as the third guy, and as being the guy that they may use inside the 5. It does scare me a little bit. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of data and analytics, kind of under your umbrella at fantasypoints.com, you have a bunch of really good podcasts. And one of those has Graham Barfield and Scott Barrett, and they had Sean Siegel on. Maybe it dropped today, but I was just listening to some of it, and he is Mr. Zero RB. And anybody who listens to your morning show on SiriusXM knows that the jokes you poke at, the skinny jean wearing, beard, pencil beard guys who are into that. So it was interesting for me to hear, Scott Barrett with his, Upside Wins Championships over here and the Zero RB guy. So I'd love to hear your thought on that. In a year where everybody's in on the running backs, everybody's going running back in the first 2 rounds, is there a chance, maybe if you're picking at the end of a 12-teamer, to go contrarian and say, you know what, I'm going to take Devontae Adams and Julio and maybe build a championship team that way?
I've thought about those type of things in the past and in previous years, zigging when others zag, but I mean, this isn't very complicated, guys. Let's just use pure common sense and logic. If everyone is taking the good running backs in the first 2 rounds and you opt for wide receivers, you're not getting any value at wide receiver. And then you're going to be looking to draft your running backs in the 4th, 5th round, and there's going to be nothing but great wide receiver options. So it's one of those, if you can't beat them, join them situations. I mean, I don't care what data points point otherwise.
Yeah.
And
every year is different, right, John?
Simple.
It's like every year. That's what I try to tell people. I'm like, there are certain years where zero RB is great. I've used it. I used it in 2013 and won a boatload of money doing it. But it was because it was the right strategy for that year. And I won't even say it's for that year. It's for the freaking draft you're in. These things are all different. Things go weird on you. And I mean, so that's what I always try to tell people. They're like, what do you think about zero RB? I'm like, man, I think it can work. I don't like it this year, but I would never rule it out ever, depending on the way a draft might be going. I was like, I feel like you got to come away with one runner in the first 2 rounds, at least this year. But to your point, I'm very much with you. I think it shouldn't just be a one or another kind of thing. Right. That's what I hate about it. Yeah.
Balance is my deal. Balance has been my deal forever. So I want my teams coming out of the draft to not have a discernible weakness. And granted, you may have the best, foursome at wide receiver ever, but when you're rolling with Bo Scarborough as your RB2, it could be a problem.
I think Bo Scarborough is sponsoring the show tonight. We're gonna get a check back.
Bo Scarborough is going to be trending. He's going to be like, "What the hell?" We're going to make Guru.
Get into here. I know your time's precious here. We appreciate it. You got to get up in 20 minutes and do a radio show in the morning. But if you go over to Fantasy Points, John has always done his draft plan article, and it's really well done. And I was checking it out a few days ago, and I went back to it tonight. And if you go and look at it, he not only breaks down positionally who he's targeting at that position based on ADP, but he does something really interesting where he breaks down a few different draft spots. So say going into your draft, you've got the 11th pick.
Yeah.
You can see how John via ADP would draft a team. I love that. And that's something you started doing years ago.
Yeah.
So just talk to a couple people about the draft plan and maybe some takeaways you got if you're looking at all that ADP.
Yeah. Well, it started with people being so new to fantasy football 20 years ago. They're like, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll do a little guide and I'll kind of hold your hand through every round essentially. And that's pretty much what it continues to be. And no surprise, quarterback is the most, very deep, the deepest it's been ever, basically the last 2 years. Wide receiver is also incredibly deep, and new for 2020, tight end is actually pretty darn deep. So yet again, position scarcity and the like. Why are you going zero running back this year? I mean, God love you if you can win, but that is not for me. So the number one takeaway is to quote unquote get in the running back business and be judicious with your picks early on. As you probably know, Brian, like as I said earlier, I want to make sure that my running backs that I take in the first 2 rounds, 3 rounds have their best football still in front of them. So, I'm crossing off a bunch of names right out of the gate. Todd Gurley has been dead to me all year. David Johnson, dead. Chris Carson, nope. So it's kind of a little bit of a handful of players. So it also kind of illustrates the players that I do like. So, the plan this year, it's very similar to years past with some slight tweaks. I used to be big on going running back, wide receiver, or wide receiver, running back in the first 2 rounds. But this year, I'm actually willing to go 3 straight running backs if need be. But in a nutshell, and I've always kind of said this, but it always applies every year, and it does certainly this year. I always believe your best chance to form the best starting lineup is to wait on quarterback and tight end. And I've never been one to take a stud tight end early. Brian, you probably remember me giving love to Travis Kelce, like literally from day one. Literally from day one.
I remember Jimmy Graham. I remember Arian Foster hype years ago. Right. I remember sitting I was working at Budweiser at the time, and I sat in a break room and I told some guys like, hey, I got a fantasy draft tonight. I go, here's a tip, draft Arian Foster. And the guy blew up and he's like, wow, that was amazing.
Yeah. Well, they'll remember that, and they'll forget like 5 terrible calls for that good call there.
Yeah. Don't remember when I drafted Monty Ball in the first round.
Right. Monty left ball. Remember.
Tatum Bell.
Yeah. I did like Tatum Bell a little bit here, but yeah, so we'll wait on the quarterback. And like for example, last year, my breakout tight end was Mark Andrews. So I can't take George Kittle. I want to get this year's Mark Andrews. So maybe I'll strike out, but I'll take 2 swings at the plate with 2 younger type of players. So wait on the quarterback. The first guy I'm targeting is Josh Allen, I think, because he's the cheapest of the running quarterbacks. So I think that's nice. 7th, 8th round. I also like Wentz and Matt Ryan, little Daniel Jones, if need be, Baker or Burrow.
Are you seeing Allen go that early? And a lot of the drafts I'm doing, especially with sharper drafters, I mean, Allen, he'll make it into the 9th, 10th. I mean, I have a few times got to take Dak in the 7th or 8th.
That's
and like
absurd.
Yeah, because they just want to keep pushing it. It's like, hey, yeah. And it's also it's a 2 flex league too. So you got So I mean, you got 2 flex spots, so that changes things as well.
That does change things a little bit. Yeah. I'm going off NFFC data, which I've always found to be the best.
It is good. Yeah, this is FFPC, so that's what's happening. It's the format, right? There you got the 2 runners, the 3 receivers, and a tight end, and 1 flex. Here you got 2 runners, 2 receivers, tight end, and 2 flex, plus it's tight end premium. So
although it does look like he's dropped a little, Allen, that is a little weird. He's at 10 here.
I think as more people start to come in that maybe aren't crazy about, that are just now getting up to speed, John, I think that's the other part is he's getting pushed down.
And how much is recency bias? People remember him blowing up in that playoff game that everybody watched. I think it was a Saturday night everyone's having a beer watching him and like, oh, geez, Josh Allen stinks. He just gave this playoff game away.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, hell, the first thing I do every year almost is I'm like, all right, who are the players who crap the bed? And do I think they're good still? Those are going to be my targets next year. By the way, I see Brady is going over. I'm out on Brady.
Really? Dwayne the Brady guy.
Yeah, I'm out. See, I'm worried about he's a rep guy. I feel like Brady's having panic attacks right now because he was in the same offense for 20 damn years, getting his normal reps. Now he's in a new system. There will be similarities, and he hasn't been able to get the reps. That's why he was pushing the damn envelope for weeks upon weeks
to get guys. Get guys out to his place. And I just look at it, and he's maniacal though, right? He's Michael Jordan of football. He's not. He just wants to show all of us that he's not done, and that he's just got that mindset. I mean, and when I watch, the Jordan rules, I'm like, that's Tom Brady. I bet you Tom Brady is exactly like that. I bet he tells his teammates, if you can't do your job, get your ass off the field.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. But here's the thing, like the guys who don't run, boy, I mean, they really need to do a lot every single week to come through. Like, I feel like if you're a non-running quarterback, you need to have a dream Matt Ryan season from, what was that, 2016 or 2017, whatever the hell year it was.
I'm with you. I think you take him after all the running quarterbacks, but when the running quarterbacks are gone, I prefer Brady to Daniel Jones. I just like Brady's weapons, but it's not that I hate Daniel Jones. I just get scared about Daniel Jones' schedule out of the gate. You got to start with Pittsburgh, then you got to play Chicago, and I can't remember who the third. It's a brutal first 3 or 4 games.
I didn't think it was that bad. I think there was a couple of them were home. I think their defense is going to stink.
There's no crowds this year. When we talk about, remember, you got to go play against the 12th man in Seattle, or you got to go play inside the Superdome
this year. That's true. Yeah,
it's a 7-on-7 drill this year. Basically, these offenses are going to light it up.
Right.
I think
watch Kirk Cousins. Watch Kirk Cousins go off because he's not going to have anxiety attacks with fans screaming and stuff like that. Like, he'll probably throw like 50 touchdowns this year.
He very well could. Let's see. Last thing we want to, before we get you out of here, John, we appreciate it. It's John Hansen, fantasy_guru on Twitter. Fantasypoints.com is where you find him and all the great stuff. Do we have a crazy Adam Kaplan story? Because I don't know if anybody else knows this. I was actually, you guys do a huge league called the ACI on the show. And I don't know if you guys are going to do one this year. I haven't heard you talk much about it, but I was in the ACI the second year it was ever around. And I was in the semifinals. Yeah. And I think it was either Adrian Peterson or Jamal Charles, or one of them came back, and it's like a 14-team league. So I had to play one of them. They crapped the bed. I ended up losing. And if I would have made it to the ship the next week, I would have won with the points my team scored. And I would have been the first listener to win the ACI. But
you would have beat me because I won the league that
year. You did. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's right. Jesus. Well, hey. We need some luck here once in a while.
Yeah. Do we have a crazy Adam Kaplan story before we get out of here?
In terms of just generally anything?
Yeah. Do you ever sit there and listen to him on the show? And then sometimes, and I love Adam. Like I talk to him as Inside the Bird stuff, which is a great podcast. And you ever hear him say I love Kenyon Drake. I'd love if he was my third running back if I get him in the 5th round. You're what?
I make fun of him all the time about that stuff. I'm like, you're living in the past, man. You're hung up on some clown from the 60s, man. No. I think one of my favorite Adam Kaplan stories is in 2000, we went to the NFC Championship game, Minnesota and the Giants, and I'm a big Vikings fan. And number one, we were on the field for pregame warmups, and it was cold, January. And I'm sitting there, me, I'm a big body language guy. I'm watching Randy Moss, Chris Carter, Dante Culpepper, Robert Smith, lights out. Culpepper had 38 touchdowns. Smith ran for 1,500. Moss and Carter in the Hall of Fame. I said to Kaplan, we're done. He's like, what are you talking about? I was like, we're done. He's like, you're insane. I was like, the game is, we're dead. 41-0 they lost. Kaplan left at the half. I'm like, dude, it's the NFL. He's like, I'm done. I'm leaving. This is over. So, yeah.
It was all based on their body language before the game. What were they doing?
They looked like they'd rather be any other place. They were moving very gingerly. I mean, it wasn't that cold, guys. Yeah. But me, as the frustrated Viking fan, I had a little epiphany after that game because I saw a kid walking down the stairs out of the stadium, and I stayed for the bitter end. I was wearing a Viking hat, and dudes were giving me high fives. Of course, they were happy. They're going to the Super Bowl. And I see this little kid walking down, clearly from Minnesota, with his father, crying. And I was going down, I think, an escalator. So I just tapped him on the shoulder. I was like, "Hey, kid, you ever hear of fantasy football?" Because I realized at that moment, this is why I'm good at fantasy football. And this is why I love it, because my damn Vikings are sure as hell never going to win a Super Bowl, a real one. So I'll win some fake ones, basically.
Exactly.
It's all right. I'm a big Eagles fan. Dwayne's a Cowboys fan. So we have a lot of good rumbles throughout the season, man. It's good stuff. But thanks so much for the time, John. You got to get up and do the morning show tomorrow with Adam Kaplan on a Friday. So thanks for taking the time, folks. Head over fantasypoints.com. Right now, it's still free, right?
No, it's not.
Okay.
We did change that up, and I hope you got it in the early bird discount.
Oh, I did.
Okay,
I did.
Good. Well, if anyone wants to check it out, they can use Hansen 10, Hansen Hansen 10, and get 10% off.
There you go.
And you don't have to take out a home equity loan to subscribe, which is nice.
So, folks, you're getting the best info in the business here. Listen to them on SiriusXM in the morning. Of course, fantasypoints.com. It is the legend, the guru, John Hansen. That'll wrap it up here at the Fantasy Football Hustle. For John Hansen, Dwayne McFarland, I am Brian Drake. We'll see you next week, folks. Never get out hustled.